plant something in front of it, he's going to raise it up.
Yeah. Oh, I see. So that's the choice, I think. Okay.
We've covered it a few times now. It's just gotten more ridiculous every time.
Yeah. I don't think you'll ever be able to get rid of these symbols. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing, of course, is to change the hearts of people. And, you know, the symbol will continuously be debated, I think, in terms of what it means, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, we trying to get rid of the Confederate flag, and I think you got some information in reference to it.
Yeah, talk about I think we should talk about the origins of it, how it developed as a symbol, and then talk about the Civil Rights Movement, how it was used in that time. And then end with where we're going in the future in terms of the debate over this symbol, you see. And I think that's well, a good way to go.
Yeah, that's the best way to go. You all know, since you spent 30 years at Vanderbilt University teaching religious history.
Yeah, plus I taught Southern history and Southern religion
and some idea
Southern religion and culture for almost 30 years at Vanderbilt. And I grew up in the demonstrations. I saw the Confederate flag all the time, as a part of my involvement in the Civil Rights demonstration. So I know about the history of it, and yeah.
It takes 10,000 hours to make you an expert on something?
Say that again.
It's 10,000 hours to make you an expert on something?
Well, I guess so.
30 years might have gotten you on
Well, 30 years, and I'm almost 66 now, but yeah, when I was a student demonstrator, Confederate flag was a persistent symbol. We saw it all the time, and I'm sure you saw it in Arkansas.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, it's part of our flag
in
Arkansas.
The Klan used to have a Christmas rally. I don't know if they had it in Arkansas.
Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the Confederate flag and the change in racial climate in the South. And we have with us this morning to talk about the Confederate flag and change in racial relations and the change in racial climate in the South, Dr. Lewis Baldwin. Dr. Baldwin, let me welcome you to the show this morning. And,
thank you.
I don't think we have to say that much about who you are to members of our audience this morning. You've been with us, since the very beginning.
About 30 years.
About 30 years.
Yes,
You've been right here, and we've been through all of these various topics together, everything from James Earl Ray, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, and just about every topic.
And Malcolm
X, and about anything that you can mention dealing with the American experience.
That's right.
And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
But before we do that, Dr. Baldwin, let's have you to give our audience some information about your background, your education, and some of your experiences during this first 6 minutes.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about the Confederate flag after we come back during the second segment.
Well, I grew up in a little town called Camden, Alabama, the Black Belt, Wilcox County, Alabama, in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. And during that particular time, I was exposed very much to Jim Crow and the Confederate flag as a symbol. I graduated from high school in Camden in 1967. At that point, I went to Talladega College, matriculated at Talladega College, graduating with a BA in history in 1971. From there, I went to Crozer Theological Seminary and Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, where I received a PhD in 1980 in American church history. And since that time, I've been teaching, and I've also been involved on some levels in social activism.
And so you bring with you this morning a lot of information in reference to the whole, as you indicated, the racial climate, changing racial climate in the South, this whole racial climate and the impact that it had upon you personally, as well as how the Confederate flag played in that. Let's start off doing this first part of the show to talk about the flag itself. What about the Confederate flag?
Well, in order to understand the Confederate flag, I think you have to go back to its origins in 1861. There were actually three versions of the Confederate flag. One called the Stars and Bars, which was used by the Confederate States from March 1861 up to May 1863. In May 1863, a second flag was adopted, the Stainless Banner, it was called, really to symbolize white racial purity. And that flag was in existence from May 1863 up to March 1865. At that point, a third flag was of course adopted, called the Bloodstained Banner, to symbolize the sacrifice that was being made by Southern troops in the Civil War. And we know that the Confederate flag was intimately connected to the beginnings of the Civil War and also to the Southern dependence on slave labor, economic dependence on slave labor. So I think we have to understand the Confederate flag in those terms. But interestingly enough, when Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant, General Grant, at Appomattox in April 1865, Lee felt then that the effort to create a separate political nation or a confederacy on the part of the South was a lost cause. And he didn't think at that point that the Confederate flag had any meaning or significance, so it should not have been used, according to him, beyond the surrender at Appomattox.
And so the Confederate flag was dead as far as he was concerned, just a part of the failed effort in order to create a confederacy. And so the flag had no significance
whatsoever, because the Confederacy was all about the effort to create a separate political nation from the United States. Okay? It symbolized states' rights. It symbolized secessionism, seceding from the Union. It symbolized white supremacy, the myth of black inferiority. Robert E. Lee didn't want anything to do with that flag after he surrendered. But we know that in the 1890s, with the rise of groups like the Sons of the Confederacy and the United Daughters of the Confederacy, these groups adopted that flag as a part of their official logo.
Okay, and so Dr. Baldwin, what we'll do, we'll take this first commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up at that particular part and talk about this flag further. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Louis Baldwin, and he's giving us some information concerning the, the Confederate flag and change in racial climates in the South. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, let's see if we can pick up where we left off the last time dealing with the Confederate flag. I think the information that you've already given in reference to the flag justifies what we're doing here, because I think it's a lot of things that people might not have, not only not have known, probably never considered in reference to this symbol that we're dealing with here. Let's pick up from that perspective.
Well, a lot of people don't know that the Confederate flag symbol, or the Confederate battle flag symbol, didn't really become important until the Civil Rights Movement. In the 1890s up to the 1930s, you have groups like the White Citizens Councils and the Ku Klux Klan, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, the Sons of the Confederacy, adopting the Confederate flag as a part of their official logo. But it was actually during the Civil Rights Movement that the power of that symbol was really resurrected by the forces that were opposed to the Civil Rights Movement. I recall growing up in Camden, Alabama in the 1960s, being involved in some of the civil rights demonstrations in that area. And the Confederate flag was a persistent symbol. We always saw it when we marched. There were people who were holding that flag up as they threw rotten eggs and urine, spit at us. So it was used by the forces of anti-civil rights, the White Citizens Council, the Ku Klux Klan. And at that point, I think this flag became a part of what some scholars call the culture wars between the Black South and the White South. You began in the 1960s to see differences of opinion over what the Confederate flag symbolized or what it meant. And as you well know, for African Americans, it was a symbol of slavery. It was a symbol of white supremacy, the myth of black inferiority, states' rights, secessionism, segregation, which at that time had taken the form of Jim Crow. But on the white side of the South, there were those who said that the Confederate flag was a symbol of heritage, of honor, of sacrifice on the part of Confederate soldiers, of family, of ancestry, pride in ancestry, pride in family. So you began to have these differences of opinion over what the Confederate flag was all about, because it became such a prominent symbol during the Civil Rights Movement.
You just saw it everywhere. I remember that period too, everywhere.
Used by anti-civil rights forces. And George Wallace, Ross Barnett in Mississippi, other governors valued that symbol. And that was a symbol of Southern pride. The University of Mississippi, with the rebel mascot and the use of the Confederate flag, the singing of Dixie. All of that was a part of a civil rights era, and that flag became very prominent during that period. But we are seeing today that debate being taken to a different level. With the massacre in South Carolina, the Emanuel 9 being killed, and the decision of Governor Nikki Haley in South Carolina to remove the Confederate flag, to sign a flag removal bill a week or so ago. Governor Robert Bentley in Alabama taking the Confederate flag down. Biloxi, Mississippi taking down Confederate flags, even though the state of Mississippi had made a decision. But I think we've seen something, we're seeing something take place now with regard to the Confederate flag, and I think it will escalate